poor girl calls a mafia boss and says his mom was poisoned at box 7 and will die without antidote. My name is Lena Moreno, and my life was measured in 8-hour shifts and the rising cost of Ricky's medication. At 23, I felt ancient. My world was a 2-room apartment in the Narrows district of Port Veritas, a city that glittered along the coast for everyone but us. For us, it was peeling paint, a radiator that clanked like a dying ghost, and the constant, simmering anxiety of debt. Ricky was all I had. He was 16, but his illness kept him thin and pale, a shadow of the loud. Funny kid he used to be. His lungs were weak, a chronic condition that stole his breath and my sleep. Every dollar I earned went to the pharmacy, to the landlord, or to the collectors who kept calling about my father's old gambling debts. My job was at the Argent. It was one of those places that didn't even have a sign, just a polished silver door and a doorman who looked like he could snap a man in half. Inside, it was all crystal and velvet, a banquet hall for the city's elite. I was a waitress, one of the invisible girls in a stiff black uniform, balancing trays of champagne and smiling until my face ached. The patrons wore more on their wrists than I made in a year. That night started like any other, a gala. The air smelled like expensive perfume and roast duck. My feet were already throbbing, a familiar burn I'd learned to ignore. Moreno, my manager, Mr. Davies, snapped, his eyes darting over my uniform. "You're on VIP boxes tonight, 7 through 12. Don't screw it up, and stay out of sight." "Yes, sir." Stay out of sight. That was the job description. We were furniture that moved. The VIP boxes were on the mezzanine, overlooking the grand ballroom. They were intimate, curtained-off lounges for the truly powerful. I spent hours clearing half-empty glasses and miniature desserts, my movements quick and silent. By 11, the party was thinning. I was assigned to the final sweep, collecting the last of the crystal before we could break down the service stations. I pushed open the heavy oak door to box 7. It was quiet. Most patrons had already left for the main floor or gone home. The room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of the city lights through the floor-to-ceiling window. A single older woman sat on a plush velvet sofa, her back to me. She was alone. A half-full wine glass sat on the low table in front of her. "Excuse me, ma'am," I murmured, moving to grab a tray from the service stand. She didn't respond. I turned, my hands full of dirty plates. "Ma'am, I'm just here to—" That's when I saw it. Her hand, resting on the arm of the sofa, was twitching. A small, violent jerk of the fingers. My breath hitched. I set the plates down with a clatter I instantly regretted. "Ma'am, are you all right?" I moved closer. She was dressed beautifully, in a dark blue dress that shimmered. Silver hair was pinned in an elegant twist, but her head was slumped forward, and a small, strangled sound was coming from her throat. Oh my God, and I dropped the tray. I rushed forward, skidding slightly on the plush carpet. Her eyes were wide, unfocused, and her lips were tinged with a faint blue. She wasn't just drunk. This was something else, something terrible. Just then, I remembered. Another server, Stefan, had been assigned this box earlier. I'd seen him leave not 10 minutes ago, walking briskly, his face pale and set in a way that seemed odd at the time. He'd been carrying an empty tray. He must have delivered that last drink. The woman gasped, a wet, rattling sound. She slumped sideways, her body convulsing. Panic, cold and sharp, seized me. I should scream. I should run and get Davies. But my feet were frozen. We were taught never to make a scene, never to disturb the guests. But this woman was dying. I knelt beside her, my hands shaking. "Help is coming?" I lied, my voice a useless squeak. I looked wildly around the room. No one, and the music from downstairs was a dull, thumping bass. I fumbled for her wrist, searching for a pulse. It was there, thready and erratic. Her skin was clammy. Poison, the thought hit me like a physical blow. The way she was seizing, the blue tint. It looked exactly like the rat poison pellets my landlord sometimes left in the hallways. I had to call for help, but who? Calling 911 from inside the Argent during a gala would bring security, then Davies, then questions I couldn't answer. They would blame me. The server who was in the wrong place. The poor girl who caused a panic. I would be fired before she even reached the hospital. And if I was fired, Ricky's face flashed in my mind, pale and waiting for me at home. I couldn't lose this job, but I couldn't let her die. My eyes scanned the table, the wine glass, the woman's small, beaded clutch, and around her neck, beneath the collar of her dress, a thin silver chain. It wasn't just a necklace, it looked medical. My fingers, clumsy with fear, fumbled with the clasp. A small, silver tag fell into my palm. It wasn't a medical alert, it was engraved. On one side, a name, Maria Silviero. The blood drained from my face. Silviero. Even in the Narrows, everyone knew that name. It was whispered in the bodegas and cursed in the bars. Dante Silviero, the man who owned the shadows of Port Veritas, the man whose picture was never in the papers, but whose influence was everywhere. The docks, the unions, the construction sites, a ghost, a monster, a mafia boss. And this was his mother. I flipped the tag over. My heart was a drum against my ribs. There was a phone number, just a number and 2 words, emergency only. This was insane. This was beyond me. This was a death sentence. If I got involved, I was dead. If I did nothing, she would be... I looked at her face, now still, her breathing shallow. She looked nice, like someone's grandmother, soft despite the expensive dress. My father used to work the edges of their world, a minor smuggler. He'd called himself a delivery man. He got in too deep, got on the wrong side of someone, and ended up in the harbor. The Silviero name had been whispered then, too, a warning. And here I was, with his mother dying at my feet. I pulled out my cheap, cracked smartphone. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely type. I stared at the number on the tag. This wasn't a 911 call. This was a call to the devil himself. I made the decision in a split second of pure, unadulterated terror. I couldn't be found here. I backed away, stumbling out of the box and into the service corridor. I ran down the stairs, past the kitchens, and burst out the service exit into the alley. The cold night air hit my face, smelling of garbage and the sea. My lungs burned. I leaned against the brick wall, gasping, and dialed the number. It rang once, twice. A voice answered, not a greeting, just a sound. Low, impatient, and laced with gravel. Speak! It was a voice that expected to be obeyed, a voice that held absolute, terrifying power. I pressed my other hand against my mouth to stifle the sob. I had to be anonymous. I had to be quick. Your mom, I whispered, my voice breaking. In box 7 at the Argent, she was poisoned. There was a dead, heavy silence on the line. I could feel the cold rage gathering on the other end, an ice storm about to break. Who is this? His voice didn't rise, but it sharpened, turning into a blade. She needs the antidote, fast, I choked out, ignoring his question. The wine. It was the wine. You have less than an hour. She's not breathing right. Stay there. Do not move. I'll have... I hung up. My body collapsed against the wall. I slid down the brick, my uniform scraping, and dropped my head to my knees. I had done it. I had called Dante Silviero. I stayed there for a minute, maybe a lifetime, just breathing. Then, the adrenaline hit again. I had to get out. I ripped off my apron and bow tie, shoving them into a dumpster. I ran. I didn't stop running until the neon lights of the Narrows felt like a safe harbor. I found Ricky asleep, the blue light of his small television flickering across his face. His breathing was okay tonight, steady. I locked our flimsy door, bolted it, and dragged the kitchen chair to wedge under the knob. It wouldn't be enough, I knew it. I didn't sleep. I watched the dawn stain the sky, my heart pounding with every car that passed, every shout in the street. I must have dozed off, slumped in the chair, because the pounding woke me. Not a polite knock, a fist, hard, solid, rattling the cheap wood of the door. Ricky sat bolt upright in his bed, his eyes wide with fear. "Lena, who is that?" "Shh, baby, stay there. It's probably just the landlord." But the landlord didn't knock like that. The pounding came again, harder. "Lena Moreno, we know you're in there. Open the door." The voice was not the landlord's. It was deep, rough, and held the same impatient command as the man on the phone. The chair I'd wedged under the knob splintered. The bolt snapped. The door flew open, slamming against the wall. 2 men filled the doorway. They were huge, dressed in immaculate black suits that seemed impossibly clean for our building. They didn't look at the peeling paint or the stained floor. They just looked at me. "Please," I whispered, scrambling to my feet, instinctively moving to stand between them and Ricky. "We don't have any money. It was my father's debt. It wasn't—" The first man, bald with a thick neck, held up a hand. "We're not here for money." He stepped inside, and the tiny apartment seemed to shrink. The air sucked out of it. His eyes flicked to Ricky, who was clutching his blanket to his chest. "Get your brother," the man said, his voice flat. "You're coming with us." "Where?" My voice was shaking, but I held my ground. "I'm not going anywhere. You can't just—" "We can," the second man said. He was younger. With restless eyes, he reached inside his jacket, and I saw the black molded grip of a handgun. My blood turned to ice. "Okay." The word was barely audible. "Okay, just please don't scare him." I nodded toward Ricky. "Get your things," the bald man said. "You have 1 minute." I grabbed Ricky's medication from the bedside table. Shoving the precious vials and inhalers into my worn-out backpack, I grabbed his coat and my own. "Lena, I'm scared," Ricky whispered, his hand finding mine. "It's okay, Rick. It's gonna be okay." It was the biggest lie I'd ever told. They marched us down the stairs, past neighbors who peeked through their curtains and then quickly looked away. They knew. In the Narrows, you learn not to see things like this. A black, shining SUV was parked at the curb, an island of obscene wealth in our sea of poverty. The engine was silent, but it hummed with power. The bald man opened the back door. "Get in." The ride was silent. Ricky held my hand, his knuckles white. I stared out the tinted windows as we left the Narrows, then the downtown district, and climbed the winding hills into the part of Port Veritas I'd only ever seen from a distance. The air grew cleaner, the trees greener, the houses turned into mansions. We drove through a massive wrought iron gate that opened silently for us. The estate was— I didn't have words for it. It wasn't a house, it was a fortress, a modern castle of glass and dark stone, perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean. The gardens alone were bigger than my entire apartment building. They dragged us out of the car and through a set of imposing front doors. The inside was cold, all marble floors and soaring ceilings. It felt like a museum or a tomb. They pushed me into a vast, empty room. It looked like a study, with dark wood walls lined with books that I was certain no one had ever read. A massive desk sat at one end, facing the windows and the sea. "Stay here," the bald man ordered. He pushed Ricky down into a leather chair in the corner. "And don't touch anything." They left us, the heavy door clicking shut with a sound of finality. Ricky's breathing was starting to get ragged, the stress. Hey, I whispered. Kneeling in front of him, I pulled his inhaler from the backpack. "Breathe with me. Rick, slow in and out. That's it, you're okay. I'm right here." He took a shaky puff, his eyes still wide with terror. "Lena, who are these people? What do they want?" "I don't know, baby, but I'm not going to let them hurt you. I promise." The door opened again. This time, it wasn't the men in suits. He was tall. That was the first thing I noticed. Taller than the doorway seemed to allow. He wore a simple black shirt and dark trousers, no suit, but he moved with an authority that made the other men look like children playing dress-up. His black hair was cut short. His face was all sharp angles and hard planes. He looked like a fallen angel, carved from unforgiving stone. But his eyes, they were the darkest, coldest things I had ever seen. They swept the room, dismissed Ricky in an instant, and then landed on me. And I knew this was him. This was the voice from the phone. Dante Silviero. He didn't speak. He just walked to the desk and stood behind it, his hands resting lightly on the polished wood. He stared at me, his gaze so intense it felt like a physical weight, pressing me into the floor. He was assessing me, taking me apart. The two men who brought us stood like statues by the door. "You're the girl from the alley," he said. It wasn't a question. His voice was the same as on the phone, low, controlled, and utterly lethal. I couldn't speak. I just nodded, my throat clamped shut. "You made a call." I nodded again. He leaned forward, just slightly. "How did you know she was poisoned?" I saw her," I stammered. She was sick, convulsing, her lips were blue. "You're a doctor?" His tone was laced with disbelief. "No, I'm a waitress, I was working, I knew it wasn't right." "So a waitress, diagnosed a poisoning in the dark and decided to call a private number instead of 911. Why?" His logic was a steel trap, and I was caught in it. I was scared," I whispered, the admission tearing from me. "I saw the tag, the name. I knew who she was. I didn't want any trouble." "You're in trouble now, Lena." Hearing him say my name sent a fresh wave of terror through me. They had my name. They had my home. They had my brother. "The footage from the service hall was blurry," he continued, his voice dangerously soft. "But the footage from the alley was clearer. My men found your apron in the dumpster. The Argent keeps very detailed files on its staff." He knew everything. He took a step from behind the desk, and I flinched, pulling back. I was still kneeling on the floor from where I'd been calming Ricky. "Please," I begged, the tears I'd been holding back finally spilling over. "I didn't do anything. I was trying to help. I swear I just wanted to help her." "You saw the server who brought the drink," he stated. My head snapped up. How did he... I saw someone leave. Yes, but I didn't see his face. Clearly. Another lie. I had seen Stefan, but I wasn't a snitch. In the Narrows. Snitches ended up in the same harbor my father did. His eyes narrowed. "You're lying." "No, please, I'm scared. Look at my brother. He's sick. We don't have anything to do with this." At that, Ricky made a small, wheezing sound. Dante Silviero's gaze finally moved to him. He looked at Ricky, really looked at him, taking in the pale skin, the blue tint to his nail beds, the inhaler clutched in his hand. "He's sick," Dante said, his voice flat. "Yes," I said, my voice thick with tears. "He has a chronic lung condition. He needs medication. Please, we have to go home. He needs his nebulizer." Dante looked at me, then at Ricky, then at the two men by the door, the bald man, the one who had grabbed us, took a half step forward, his hand moving toward his jacket again, as if to grab me, to force the truth. "Don't," Dante said. The word was quiet, but it cracked through the room like a whip. The bald man froze instantly, his hand dropping to his side. Dante turned his cold gaze back to me. "You're right about one thing. You were trying to help." He paused, and his expression was unreadable. "My mother is alive. The doctor said 10 more minutes, and she would have been gone. You saved her life." A small, hysterical laugh bubbled in my chest. I had saved her, and my reward was being dragged from my home and interrogated by a mafia boss. "But," he said, and the room went cold again, "that means you're a witness, and the person who did this knows it." What does that mean?" "It means you're not going home. It's not safe." He looked past me, at Ricky. "Neither of you." "You can't keep us here." I scrambled to my feet, anger suddenly cutting through the fear. "This is kidnapping." "This is protection," he corrected me, his voice iron. "A protection you will accept, because if you walk out that door, you won't last a day. The people I'm dealing with don't leave loose ends. And right now, you and your brother are the only loose ends I can find." He turned to the bald man. "Marco, take them to the guest wing. Put guards on the door. And get Doctor Aris up here. Now, have him bring whatever the boy needs." "Yes, boss." My head was spinning. A guest wing, a doctor. "No," I said, though my voice shook. I can't. I have my job. "You have nothing," Dante cut me off, his voice devoid of pity. "You have a sick brother and a mountain of debt. I know all about your father. Lena, I know about the collectors. You have no job. I called the Argent this morning. You've been fired for causing a disruption." The last of my strength left me. Fired, of course. "You'll stay here," he said, his voice final. "Doctor, Aris will look after your brother. You will be safe, and you will not leave. Not until I find the man who poisoned my mother." He turned away from me, a clear dismissal. Marco motioned with his head. "This way." I had no choice. I helped Ricky to his feet, my backpack with his precious medicine feeling impossibly heavy. We were prisoners. They put us in a room that was larger than our entire apartment. It had its own bathroom, a balcony overlooking the ocean, and a bed that looked big enough for 5 people. It was beautiful, and I'd never been more terrified in my life. A man in a suit, Dr. Aris, arrived within 20 minutes. He was kind, with gentle eyes, and he spoke to Ricky with a softness that almost made me cry again. He examined him, checked his vitals, and asked me questions about his medication. "He's stable, Doctor," Aris said, closing his bag, "but his condition is poorly managed. The stress isn't helping. I'll have a nebulizer and a new course of steroids sent up." I can't pay for that," I whispered, ashamed. "Doctor," Aris gave me a sad smile. "Mister, Silviero is taking care of it." After the doctor left, Ricky fell into an exhausted, uneasy sleep in the massive bed. The medication, the fear, and the sheer strangeness of it all had drained him. I sat on the edge of the bed, watching him breathe. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. It was the most beautiful, terrifying sunset I had ever seen. I was trapped. I had saved a life, and in doing so, I had lost my own, my meager, difficult, but known life was gone. Hours passed, the house was silent, but I knew the guards were outside the door. I couldn't even cry. I was numb, hollowed out by fear. Ricky stirred, his breath catching in a small cough. I stood up, my muscles aching, and went to the bathroom to get him a glass of water from the marble sink. When I came back, I stood by his bedside, smoothing his hair back from his damp forehead. He was all I had, and this man, this Dante Silviero, had taken him, had taken us, as easily as he would buy a car. The dam of my control finally broke. It wasn't a loud sob. It was a silent, wretched weeping. My shoulders shaking as I tried to muffle the sound against my hand. I was so tired, so scared, and so utterly, completely alone. I didn't hear him approach. The carpet was too thick, his movements too quiet. I just felt a presence, a change in the air. I froze, my hand still over my mouth. I turned my head, just slightly. He was standing in the shadows of the hallway, just outside the open door of our room, Dante. He wasn't looking at me. His gaze was fixed on Ricky, sleeping in the bed. His face, usually so cold and hard, was different. The shadows softened the sharp angles. But it was more than that. There was something in his eyes, a stillness, a darkness that wasn't just cold, but heavy. He watched Ricky for a long, silent moment. I don't think he knew I was awake. I don't think he knew I was watching him. Then, his gaze flicked to me. He saw my tear-streaked face, my hand pressed to my mouth, my body trembling. We stared at each other across the opulent room, the prisoner and the king. He didn't say anything. His expression didn't change, the mask of cold control snapping back into place. But I saw it. Just for a second, something in his eyes had flickered. He had been affected. Then, as silently as he had appeared, he turned and was gone. disappearing into the darkness of his own home. I was left alone with my brother, my tears, and the terrifying realization that my life was now in the hands of a man who was just as much a monster as he was, possibly a savior. The first few days were a blur of gilded captivity. My new life at Dante Silviero's estate was a contradiction I couldn't understand. Ricky was installed in a suite down the hall from mine, in the guest wing, a name that felt like a cruel joke. He had a private nurse, round-the-clock care from doctor, Aris, and food I'd only ever seen in magazines. He was breathing better than he had in years, the color returning to his cheeks, the dark circles under his eyes fading. And that, more than the marble floors or the armed guards at the door, was the most effective chain. I couldn't run, not when running meant taking Ricky away from the only real medical care he'd ever had. Dante was a ghost. He was in the house. I knew that. I felt his presence like a drop in barometric pressure, but I rarely saw him. I spent my time in the room, or sitting with Ricky, reading to him from a library of books that had appeared on a cart. On the third morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I found Marco, the bald guard, standing outside my door. I need to speak to him, I said. My voice was stronger than I expected. Marco just looked at me with flat, empty eyes. Mr. Silviero is busy. I'm not asking. Tell him I need to see him. Now. Maybe it was the desperation, or maybe he was just bored. He lifted a radio to his mouth and spoke in a low code. A minute later, he nodded. His study, this way. The study was the same room where he'd interrogated me, the one that smelled like old leather and the ocean. He was standing by the window, a phone to his ear, his back to me. He was speaking in rapid, angry Italian, a language that sounded beautiful and brutal all at once. He didn't turn around, just held up a hand. I stood there, feeling small and stupid, waiting for him to finish. He finally hung up, the click of the phone loud in the silence. He turned, his face a mask of cold control. You wanted to see me, Lena. You have to let us go, I said, the words rushing out. I'm innocent. I've told you everything I know. I saw a server, Stefan. He was pale. He left the box. That's it. That's all I have. Please, my brother, he's better, I know, but this isn't our life. We don't belong here. He watched me, his dark eyes unblinking. You think you're innocent. I'm innocent. You're innocent of the poisoning. Yes, I believe that. A tiny, fragile bubble of hope rose in my chest. Then, but you're lying to me. The bubble burst. What? No. He took a step closer. He was so tall, he blocked out the light from the window. You just gave me a name. Stefan, you didn't give me that name 3 days ago. You held it back. What else are you holding back? I was scared, I stammered. In my neighborhood, we don't talk. We don't snitch. People who talk end up like your father, he finished, his voice flat. I froze. My blood ran cold, colder than the look in his eyes. What do you know about my father? Eduardo Moreno, a small-time smuggler, worked for a man named Vinny Gallo, who worked for a man who worked for my father. He got greedy. He got caught in a war he didn't understand, and he got dead. It was my life, my entire painful past, summed up in 4 cold sentences. Tears of rage and shame pricked my eyes. He was my father. And he was a fool who played in a world he wasn't built for, just like you, when you decided to make that call. I was trying to save your mother, I shouted, my voice cracking. And you did. His voice dropped, becoming dangerously soft. But you also made yourself a target. You said you saw Stefan. My men picked him up 2 hours ago. You found him. At the bottom of the Port Veritas harbor, he's been dead since that night. My knees went weak. I gripped the back of a leather chair to keep from falling. Dead. Stefan was dead. The man who had served the wine was murdered. This is an inside job, Lena, Dante said, his voice a low growl. Someone in my own organization, someone who trusted Stefan to be the hand and then silenced him. Someone who wanted my mother dead. The wine. It came from my private cellar. The bottle was switched. Only 5 people have a key. His trust was cracking. I could see the paranoia, the cold fury swirling behind his eyes. He was a king whose castle was crumbling from within. "That's why you can't leave," he said, turning back to the window. "Whoever did this failed. My mother is in critical condition, but she's alive. They will try again, and they will try to silence the one person who saw what happened. You. So I'm a prisoner." "You're protected." "It's the same thing," I whispered. He looked at me over his shoulder. "It is not." I was allowed to walk in the gardens, under the watchful eye of 2 guards who followed at a discreet distance. The estate was beautiful, a prison of roses and ocean mist. I was restless, my mind replaying Dante's words. Stéphane was dead. I found a stone bench hidden by a tangle of white jasmine. The smell was sweet, almost sickening. It reminded me of something. I was 15. My father was at the kitchen table, a rare night at home. He smelled of whiskey and the sea, his 2 signature scents. He was counting a thick wad of cash. "Where did you get that, Papa?" I asked, eyeing the money. We were behind on rent, again. "Just a delivery, mija." He licked his thumb and kept counting. "Good pay." "A delivery for who?" He glanced up, his eyes sharp. "You don't need to know. You just need to stay in school. Stay away from this." "Stay away from what?" "The men on the docks, the men who make deliveries, the Silviero people. They own this city. Lena, you look at them, you smile, and you walk away. You never get involved. You understand?" "I understand, Papa." A month later, 2 police officers were at our door. He had been involved. He had been caught in a gang war. He was gone. The memory was so vivid, I could almost smell the whiskey, and I could feel the same cold dread I'd felt then. I was involved. I was trapped in the exact world my father had died trying to warn me about. I put my head in my hands, the scent of jasmine filling my lungs. "Ma'am?" I looked up. A man in a gardener's uniform was standing a few feet away, holding a pair of shears. I didn't recognize him. He wasn't one of the usual groundskeepers I saw. "You shouldn't be in this section," he said. His voice was rough. "It's closed for pruning." "Oh," I said, standing up. "I'm sorry. I didn't see a sign." "It's fine. I'll just show you the way out." He stepped closer. Something was wrong. His eyes, they weren't the eyes of a gardener. They were cold, focused, and fixed on my throat. He moved fast. He dropped the shears and lunged, one hand grabbing my hair, the other jamming something hard and metallic into my side. It wasn't a gun. It was a needle, a syringe. I screamed. I twisted, my nails raking at his face. He grunted, his grip tightening in my hair, yanking my head back. "Hold still, you..." "Drop it," Marco's voice, roaring from across the lawn. The hitman didn't hesitate. He shoved me to the ground, hard, my head cracking against the stone path. He turned, pulling a gun from his waistband, a gun with a long, thick silencer. There were no loud bangs, just 2 dull foot sounds. The hitman's body jerked, a small, dark stain appearing on his chest. He staggered, looked down at his shirt in surprise, and then collapsed onto the grass, not 5 feet from me. I was scrambling backward, crab walking, my breath sobbing in my chest. Marco and another guard were on the man in an instant, kicking the gun away, checking his pulse. "He's gone, Marco," the other guard said. Marco stood up, his own gun still in his hand, and spoke into his radio. "Package secure. Threat neutralized. Garden west." Then he looked at me, his face grim. "Are you hurt?" I just shook my head, my teeth chattering. My scalp ached where he'd pulled my hair. The door to the house slammed open. Dante, he wasn't running, but he moved across the lawn with a speed that was terrifying. He didn't even look at the dead man. His eyes were only on me. He reached me in 3 long strides, squatting down, his hands grabbing my shoulders. "Are you hurt?" "No," I whispered. He had a needle." Dante's eyes flicked to the syringe. Lying in the grass, his jaw clenched so hard a muscle jumped. The look on his face wasn't concern. It was a black, murderous rage that was far more frightening than the hitman had been. "He got this close," Dante said, "yeah?" His voice a low snarl, directed at Marco, who was standing stiffly. "On my grounds, with my men." "Boss, Get him out of my sight," Dante snapped, gesturing to the dead body. "And get this place clean, now." He turned back to me. His hands were still on my shoulders, his grip like iron. "This is what I was talking about." He stood, pulling me up with him as if I weighed nothing. I was shaking so hard I could barely stand. "You're not safe here," he said, more to himself than to me. He moved us that night. The villa, he explained in the back of a black car that felt like a rolling vault, was compromised. If they could get a man in, posing as a gardener, they could get anyone in. We were going to his penthouse. "What about Ricky?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "He's already there. Doctor. Aris is with him. They're in a secure suite on the floor below mine. You'll be able to see him every day." The penthouse was a fortress in the sky. It took up the entire top floor of the tallest, blackest glass building in Port Veritas. The elevator opened directly into the living room, a vast space of cool grays, polished chrome, and windows that showed the entire city glittering like a carpet of diamonds below. It was the most beautiful place I'd ever seen, and the loneliest. Ricky was safe, as promised, in a palatial suite with his doctor and a nurse, but I was here, with him. And the dynamic changed. He was no longer a ghost. He was there. He worked from a stark, modern office in the penthouse. He ate at the massive dining table. He stood for hours, staring out the windows at the city he owned. We were trapped together, two isolated people in a glass cage. The tension was a living thing between us. It was in the way he'd watch me when I thought he wasn't looking. It was in the way my breath would catch when he entered a room. He began to treat me with a strange mix of dominance and gentleness. He would order me to eat, but the food that arrived would be from the city's finest restaurants. He found me trying to read an old newspaper, and the next day, a stack of new paperbacks was on my nightstand. One evening, I found him in his office, a glass of amber liquid in his hand, staring at the file on my father. "You shouldn't be in here," he said, not looking up. "You're reading about my father," I said, my voice quiet. "I'm understanding my enemy. To do that, I have to understand the people they've already broken." "My father wasn't broken," I snapped. He was just a man." He finally looked up, his dark eyes pinning me. "No. Lena, in our world, there are no just men. There are predators, and there is prey. Your father was prey. I'm trying to figure out which one you are." "I'm not either," I said, lifting my chin. "I'm just a witness, a prisoner. Let me go, Dante." "I can't." The words were quiet. "Not until this is done." The flirtation, if you could call it that, was dangerous. It was eye contact held a second too long. It was the way he'd hand me a glass of water, his fingers brushing mine, sending a jolt through my body that felt like static. It was in the way I started to talk back, my fear being replaced by a restless, simmering anger. Then came the storm. It rolled in off the ocean, a true Port Veritas tempest, throwing sheets of rain against the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city lights were blurred, the world outside erased. The penthouse felt even smaller, the air crackling with electricity, both outside and in. I was pacing the living room, my nerves raw. I hadn't seen Ricky all day. The elevators were on security lockdown because of the storm. "I want to see my brother," I said, stopping in front of Dante, who was reading a book by the fireplace. "You can't," he said, not looking up. "The elevators are locked down." "Then unlock them." "It's not safe. No one goes in or out." "I'm not no one. He's my brother. I need to know he's okay. That wind, it scares him." Dante finally closed his book and set it down. He stood up, a predator unfolding. "He's fine. Doctor, Aris is with him. He's safer than you are." "Safer?" I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "You call this safe? I'm your prisoner. Ricky is your prisoner. We're just things to you. Leverage, protection. What happens when you don't need us anymore? Dante, when you find who you're looking for, do you just get rid of us like Stefan? His face hardened. He moved toward me, and I backed up, my old fear returning. I hit the wall of the hallway that led to the bedrooms. He kept coming. He stopped a foot away, his voice dropping to that low, dangerous growl. Be very careful, Lena. Or what? I shot back. My own anger, my grief, my terror finally boiling over. You'll have me killed? Oh wait, someone's already tried that. Or maybe you'll just lock me up tighter? You can't. I'm already at the top of your tower. I am keeping you alive, he snarled, his anger now a palpable force in the narrow space. Alive? I shoved at his chest, a useless gesture against a wall of muscle. This isn't living. This is just waiting. You don't care about me. You don't care about Ricky. You just use people. You move us around like we're pawns on your chessboard. Your mother, me, your men. We're all just pieces to you, aren't we? The accusation hit him. I saw it. It wasn't the anger that got through. It was the truth. His defenses cracked open. The rage in his eyes faded, replaced by something raw, something broken. He slammed his hand against the wall next to my head, the impact making me jump. The rain lashed against the windows, a soundtrack to the chaos. You think I'm a monster, he whispered, his voice hoarse. He was so close I could feel the heat radiating off his body, smell the faint, clean scent of his soap. Maybe you're right. Dante, I breathed, my anger vanishing, replaced by a new, terrifying emotion. His anger was gone, but the desire that had been simmering beneath it for weeks was now, suddenly, unleashed. It was in his eyes, in the way his gaze dropped to my mouth. You don't know me, he said, his voice thick. I know enough. No, you don't. His other hand came up, not in anger, but with a strange, hesitant gentleness. His thumb brushed my cheek, his touch rough but surprisingly warm. I flinched, but I didn't pull away. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it would break through my ribs. He leaned in, slowly, giving me every chance to escape, but I was frozen, paralyzed by the storm, by him, by the sudden, undeniable pull I felt toward this dangerous, broken man. His lips touched mine. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was intense, charged, a desperate collision. It was all the tension, all the fear, all the unspoken words of the last few weeks, exploding in a single moment. His mouth was hard, demanding, and I met it with my own confused desperation. But then, just as quickly, it changed. The raw intensity softened, turning into something else, something unexpectedly tender. His hand moved from the wall to my hair, his fingers tangling in the strands, holding my head as if I were something precious. His other hand found my waist, pulling me away from the wall and against him. I was overwhelmed. My hands were on his chest, my fingers gripping the fine material of his shirt. I should have been pushing him away. Instead, I was holding on. The kiss deepened, and all the fight went out of me. It was no longer an attack. It was a conversation. It was a raw, emotional plea in the middle of a storm. The rain hammered the glass, a frantic drumming that matched the beat of my heart. His lips were surprisingly soft, moving over mine with a hesitant exploration, a question I didn't know how to answer. This was Dante Silviero, a killer, a mafia boss, the man who had taken my life apart, and he was kissing me like I was the only thing holding him together. He broke the kiss, resting his forehead against mine. We were both breathing hard, our breath mingling. His eyes were closed, his face etched with a vulnerability I had never seen, a vulnerability that vanished almost as quickly as it appeared. He pulled back, the mask slammed down. The man who looked at me now was the cold, calculating boss again. His hand dropped from my waist, his expression unreadable, almost quiet. He looked at me for one long, searching moment, as if he didn't recognize me, or himself. Then, Without a single word, he turned and walked away, leaving me shaking in the hallway, my lips tingling, my world tilted on an axis I never knew existed. I was confused, terrified, and, for the first time in my life, I had no idea what I was feeling. Far across town, in a dimly lit office that smelled of stale cigars, one of Dante's most trusted allies, Rico Alvanetti, poured 2 glasses of scotch. He slid one across the desk to the woman sitting in the shadows. "He's moved the girl to the penthouse," Rico said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. He was a man who smiled often, a man Dante had known since childhood. A slender hand, nails painted dark red, picked up the glass. "That complicates things." A smooth, female voice replied. "He's spooked," Rico continued, swirling his drink. "He knows it was an inside job. He's looking at his inner circle. He's looking at me." "Then you'd better make sure he stops looking at you," the woman said, her voice turning to steel. "Make him look at the girl. Frame her. And Rico, finish the job. His mother is a problem, but the girl is the key. Get rid of them both, this time. Do not fail." After the storm, the penthouse was silent. The kiss hung in the air between us, a shared, unspoken thing that was more volatile than the lightning had been. Dante retreated. He became, once again, the cold, distant man from the first day, but now his coldness felt intentional, like a shield held up against me. He regretted it. I could see it in the way he avoided my eyes, the way his voice was clipped and formal when he spoke to me. The new rules came the next morning. "You will no longer have access to the guest wing without an escort," he informed me, not looking up from a file on his desk. "I need to see my brother. Your visits will be scheduled, once in the morning, once in the evening, an hour each. Marco will take you." His control was back, but it was sharper, more brittle. He was not just protecting me from an outside threat, he was protecting himself from me. He was afraid, not of the men who wanted him dead, but of the moment of vulnerability in the hallway. He was furious that I had seen it, and even more furious that he had allowed it. He was trying to put me back in the box labeled witness, but I didn't fit there anymore. I was too confused to be angry. The kiss hadn't just been terrifying, it had been tender. And that tenderness, coming from a man like Dante Silviero, was the most dangerous thing of all. I spent my time in my room or staring out the wall of windows at the city. I was restless, trapped, and my mind kept replaying that moment, the anger in his eyes, the shift to raw desire, the shocking softness of his mouth. A few days later, I was walking past his office to go to the living room. The door was open, just a crack. I always walked by quickly, never wanting to engage, but I heard his voice. It was that low, lethal growl, the one he'd used on the phone. I froze. "This is not a simple grab," he was saying, his voice laced with venom. "This is a betrayal. Someone is trying to dismantle everything I've built." I pressed my ear closer to the sliver of open air. "A younger rival. Yes, the Galliani family is involved. They're backing someone on the inside. They think they can replace me. They think I'm weak." A low, humorless laugh. "Poisoning my mother." It was a message, a first move in a war I didn't even know was being declared. I backed away, my blood icing over. A betrayal, a younger rival. This was so much bigger than I thought. The poisoning wasn't just a random act of violence. It was a coup. Someone in his inner circle was working with an enemy, trying to dethrone him. Suddenly, his paranoia, his coldness, his obsessive control, it all snapped into focus. He wasn't just a tyrant, he was a king under siege, and his own court was full of vipers. He was walking through his life knowing one of the men he trusted, one of the 5 men with a key, had tried to murder his mother. My fear for myself began to morph into a strange, unwelcome empathy for him. Later that night, I found him in the living room, standing by the windows, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He was staring at the city, but he wasn't seeing it. "How is she?" I asked, my voice quiet. He stiffened, but didn't turn. "What?" "Your mother, how is she? Really?" He was silent for a long time. So long I thought he would ignore me or tell me to leave. "She's conscious," he finally said, his voice flat. "But she's weak. She can't speak. The doctors, they don't know if she'll make a full recovery." He turned to look at me, and his eyes were not cold. They were empty, burned out. "You wanted to know why I'm like this? Why this world is the way it is?" I didn't answer. I just waited. "My mother, she wasn't part of this. Not originally." He took a drink. "She was a school teacher. 2nd grade. Can you believe that? She taught kids how to read. She loved it. She left the life, married a civilian, and was happy." His voice was rough with an emotion I couldn't name. "My father died. I was 22. I took over, and the moment I did, the moment I became Dante Silviero, the boss, I made her a target again, the other families, my own people. They wouldn't let her stay out. She was leverage, a weakness, so I brought her back, for her own protection." He laughed, a bitter, self-loathing sound. "For her protection, I forced her back into this cage, and the cage is what poisoned her. That wine, it was meant for me. It was in my cellar. But she was hosting her charity friends. She wanted to serve them the best." He slammed the glass down on a table. "I did this to her. I dragged her back in, and my power is what put that glass in her hand. That's my guilt to carry." I had no words. I was looking at the monster of Port Veritas, a man who moved in shadows and death, and all I could see was a lonely, guilty son, trapped by a legacy he both despised and defended. My feelings for him, so confused and terrified, deepened into something heavier, something far more complicated. The next afternoon, I was with Ricky. Dante, in his strange way, had arranged for art supplies to be brought to my brother's suite. Doctor Aris had suggested it, to help with his anxiety. We were sitting on the floor, a drop cloth spread out, painting. Ricky was attempting a very blue, very enthusiastic painting of the ocean view. I was just mixing colors, laughing at his mess, for the first time in, I couldn't remember how long. I felt a moment of peace. We were safe. He was healthy. We were just two people, painting. The door to the suite opened. Dante. I tensed immediately, the laughter dying in my throat. He was in his shirt sleeves, his expression unreadable. He had come to tell me my hour was up. But he stopped in the doorway. He just watched. His eyes took in the mess, the bright paints, Ricky's smile, me sitting on the floor with green paint on my cheek. "Dante," Ricky said, his voice bright. He had no fear of this man. To him, Dante was the man who had made the coughing stop. "Come see, I'm painting the ocean, but I can't get the waves right." I held my breath. I expected him to scowl, to leave, to call for Marco. Instead, Dante walked slowly into the room. He didn't sit. He just stood over Ricky's painting, his hands clasped behind his back. "The waves," he said, his voice quiet. "You need more white. You're forgetting the white caps." Ricky grinned. "Show me." I stared, but Dante just looked at Ricky, then at me, at the simple, messy, domestic piece. He looked like a man staring at the sun, unsure if it was beautiful or if it was just going to blind him. His face was a mask of conflicting emotions. He cleared his throat and backed out of the room. "Marco is waiting. Lena, your time is up." He left abruptly, but I had seen it. I had seen him look at our normal, peaceful moment like it was something he had been starved of his entire life. A few days later, the real world, my old world, came crashing back in. I was watching the news in my room, a privilege he allowed, a breaking story. Firefighters responding to a blaze in the Narrows this morning discovered the body of the building's owner. A picture of my old, crumbling apartment building flashed on the screen. "Juanti, the victim has been identified as Salvatore Salvi, the landlord. Police are treating the death as a homicide." My blood ran cold. Mr. Salvi, the man who had threatened to evict me every month, the man whose hands always lingered too long when he collected the rent, he was murdered. I ran from the room, down the hall to his office. Not even thinking to knock, I burst in. Dante was on the phone. He looked up, his eyes narrowing in annoyance, then concern, as he saw the look on my face. "I'll call you back," he said, hanging up. "Did you do this?" I whispered, my voice shaking. "My landlord, Mr. Salvi, on the news. He's dead. Did you kill him?" Dante leaned back in his chair, his face a perfect, unreadable mask. I had nothing to do with it. I stared at him, searching his face. He was telling the truth. He hadn't personally done it. "Oh, thank God," I breathed, sinking against the doorframe. "Lena!" His voice was soft, and it made me look up. I didn't order it, but he was a threat. My men, they took care of the threats from your old life. The debt collectors who were calling you, the landlord who was harassing you, they're gone. They won't bother you again. Ever. I just stared at him, horrified. He had erased my past, with a simple, unspoken order. He had wiped out the people who haunted me. It was the most terrifying, and in a dark, twisted way, the most protective gesture anyone had ever made. I was his, my past, my present, my future. He owned all of it. I was quiet for days after that. I was processing the kiss, the betrayal, his confession, the murder. I was living in a moral gray area so vast I didn't know which way was up. One evening, Marco appeared at my door. "Mister, Silviero requests your presence on the roof." My stomach clenched. The roof? Why? He did not say, "Ma'am." This was it. I had learned too much. He was getting rid of me. My hands were shaking as I rode the private elevator up. The doors opened onto the empty, wind-swept roof. But it wasn't empty. In the center, a small table was set for two, draped in a white cloth. String lights had been hung, creating a small canopy of soft light, and Dante was standing there, not in a suit, but in a dark sweater. What is this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I was informed," he said, his voice formal, almost shy, "that I am in possession of certain information and that today is your birthday." I stopped. My birthday. I had completely forgotten. He motioned to the table. "I thought we could eat." I looked at the table. A simple pasta dish, a bottle of sparkling water, and a small, plain cheesecake with a single unlit candle on it. I started to cry, not loud sobs, just silent, hot tears that slipped down my cheeks. I couldn't stop them. His face panicked. "Lena—" "No one," I whispered, dashing the tears away with the back of my hand. "No one has remembered my birthday. Not since my father died. That was 10 years ago." He was silent. He walked over, and for a second, I thought he was going to touch me. Instead, he pulled out my chair. "Happy birthday, Lena." We ate in a strange, charged silence. The food was incredible, but it was the cheesecake, the simple, thoughtful cheesecake, that shattered the last of my defenses. Later, we were back in the penthouse. The tension was so thick I could barely breathe. The act of kindness, the intimacy of the shared meal, had stripped us both bare. "Why did you do that?" I asked, standing in the middle of the living room, twisting my hands. "I don't know," he answered, his voice rough. He was standing by the fireplace, his back to me. "Maybe I just wanted you to have one good day." He turned. His eyes were dark, and the longing I saw in them, the same longing from the hallway, was back. But this time, it wasn't angry. It was just there, a raw, lonely ache. He didn't move. He was leaving the choice to me. And I made it. I walked toward him, my footsteps silent on the plush rug. I stopped just in front of him. I could feel the heat coming off his body, see the pulse hammering in his throat. "Thank you," I whispered. He reached up, his hand hesitating, before he gently, carefully touched my face. His thumb brushed over the spot where my tears had been. "I shouldn't," he whispered, his voice thick with a conflict that tore at him. "I know," I whispered back. His lips met mine. This time, there was no storm, no anger, no desperation. It was slow, it was careful, it was a question, a plea. His mouth was soft, hesitant, as if he was afraid of breaking me, or afraid of himself. I kissed him back, my hands coming up to rest on his chest. I felt his heart pounding under my palm, a frantic rhythm that matched my own. His kiss was one of exploration, of finding new ground, of saying all the things we couldn't say. His other hand went to my waist, pulling me closer, not crushing me, but anchoring me. He broke the kiss to rest his forehead against mine. "Lena," he breathed, his eyes closed. He lifted me then as if I weighed nothing, his arms strong and sure around me. He carried me from the living room, down the dark hallway, not to my room, but to his. His room was dark, stark, like the rest of the penthouse, smelling only of him. He set me down on the edge of the bed. The city lights were a muted glow through the windows. He knelt in front of me, his hands finding mine. His touches were slow, careful, as if he were unwrapping something incredibly fragile. He kissed my hands, my wrists, the sensitive skin of my inner arm, and with every touch, a layer of my fear melted away. He moved with a control that was almost painful, a control that spoke of a deep, suppressed longing. I met his touch, not with the desperation of our first encounter, but with a quiet, trembling acceptance. I was tired of fighting. I was tired of being scared. And in this moment, in the arms of the most dangerous man in Port Veritas, I felt for the first time in my life completely, terrifyingly safe. We came together not in a clash, but in a slow, deep merge. It was all whispered words and careful touches, a silent promise made in the dark. Later, I lay tangled in his sheets, his arm a heavy, protective weight across my waist. I watched him. He wasn't asleep. He was just watching me, his expression unreadable in the dim light. He was vulnerable in a way I knew he would never be, ever again. That intimacy changed me. I was no longer a prisoner. I was something else, and I was tired of being a pawn. I started digging. When I was in Dante's office, he was less careful about me being in there now. I saw his board, a whiteboard, with pictures and names. The 5 men with the key. One of them was Rico Alvanetti, a man I'd seen at Dante's side, a man who smiled too much. His name on the board was marked Cleared Alibi. But I remembered something, a flicker of a memory from the week before the gala. I had been in a service corridor. I had seen Rico. He was talking to Stefan, the server, an angry, quiet conversation. It had meant nothing to me then. Dante's alibi was wrong. Rico was lying. I needed proof. When Dante was in a meeting, I used his computer. I hacked into the Argent scheduling system. My old login still worked. I cross-referenced, and I found it. A delivery slip, a private function hosted by a shell corporation. In Box 7, 2 days before the poisoning, the function was approved and signed for by Rico Alvanetti. He wasn't just there, he was setting the stage. I had to tell Dante, but I needed more. I needed a witness. I called my old coworker, a girl named Maya. "Maya, it's Lena. I need a favor. I need the security logs from the week before the gala." She was terrified, but she owed me. She'd stolen money from the register, and I'd covered for her. She agreed to meet, to slip me the logbook. I had to get out. I told Marco I was going to see Ricky. I took the elevator down to his floor, but instead of going to his suite, I found the service stairs. I ran, down 50 flights of stairs. My lungs were burning, but I felt alive. I burst out into an alley, blocks away from the penthouse, and ran into the Narrows. I made it to the alley behind my old apartment. It was dark, smelling of rain and garbage. "Maya?" I called out. "Looking for this?" A man stepped out of the shadows. Not Maya. It was one of Rico's men, one I recognized from the gala. He was holding the logbook. It was a trap. 2 other men stepped out, blocking the alley. I was cornered. A black SUV screeched around the corner, its headlights blinding me, pinning the men in their glare. The doors flew open. Marco, "Get in the car, now!" he roared. I didn't hesitate. I dove in, and the SUV was moving before the door was even closed, its tires smoking. I was shaking, clutching the logbook. Maya must have given it to them. When I got back to the penthouse, Dante was waiting. He wasn't sitting. He was standing in the middle of the living room, and he was vibrating with a white-hot, terrifying rage. "What were you thinking?" he roared, the sound echoing off the glass. I flinched, but I stood my ground. "You could have been killed. You ran. After everything I've done to protect you, you ran." He wasn't just angry. He was scared. He had almost lost me. "I was trying to help you," I screamed back, my own fear and adrenaline exploding. I threw the logbook at his chest. He caught it, surprised by my violence. "It's Rico," I yelled. "It's always been Rico. He lied. He was at the Argent 2 days before the poisoning. He met with Stefan. Your alibi is garbage. He's the one." Dante froze. His rage evaporated, replaced by a cold, deadly focus. He opened the logbook. He looked at the page, then at me. He was angry at himself for missing it, and angry at me for being so reckless. "You're tired of being in a box. Dante," I said, my voice shaking but strong. "So am I. You said I was safe here. You said I was protected, but you just wanted a witness. I'm tired of being a witness. If I'm going to be stuck in this world, let me be more than just a pawn." The words hit him. He looked at me, the anger gone, replaced by awe and a deep, profound respect. He stepped toward me, and I braced myself, but he didn't yell. He just pulled me into his arms. He wrapped them around me, holding me so tight I could barely breathe, his face buried in my hair. "You reckless, brave, stupid, brilliant girl," he whispered against my scalp, his voice thick. He held me, just held me, his body shielding me from the world. I could feel the tension leaving him, replaced by a heavy, protective weight. "You're right," he said, his voice muffled. "He lied, and you risked everything to prove it." He held me longer than he ever had before. It wasn't a hug of passion, it was a hug of pure, unadulterated vulnerability. He wasn't just my captor, he wasn't just my lover, he was my partner, and that, I knew, was 1,000 times more dangerous. The new trust between us was a fragile, thin sheet of ice, and Rico Alvanetti took a hammer to it. Dante was a man transformed. His focus, once spread thin by paranoia, was now a razor's edge pointed at one name, Rico. He was in his office for hours, Marco at his side, pulling at the threads of Rico's life, his finances, his alibis. He was quiet, contained, and more dangerous than I had ever seen him. Our new dynamic was strange. We were partners, but the intimacy we'd shared, the night in his bed, was a silent, unacknowledged elephant in the penthouse. He was careful. He would bring me coffee in the morning, his fingers brushing mine, his eyes holding mine for a beat too long. It was a silent acknowledgement. You are part of this now. But Rico had been a step ahead. He had been planning his betrayal for years, and he wasn't going to be unraveled by a waitress and a logbook. He knew Dante. He knew his weaknesses. He knew that the deepest paranoia is always reserved for the one you let closest to you. It happened 2 days after my reckless trip to the Narrows. I was with Ricky, in his suite. We were playing a card game, and I was laughing, truly laughing, for the first time in memory. Ricky was thriving. His cough was gone. His skin had color. He was witty and bright. Marco knocked, his face grim. "Lena, the boss needs to see you. Now!" The laughter died. "Is everything okay?" "Just come with me." A cold dread trickled down my spine. The air in the penthouse had changed. When we got back to the top floor, the living room was empty. The silence was heavy, oppressive. "He's in his office," and Marco said, and then he did something he'd never done. He stopped me, his big hand on my arm. "Be careful, Lena. He's not himself." I walked to the office, my heart hammering. The door was open. Dante was standing behind his desk, but it wasn't the desk from a few days ago, covered in plans. It was clean, except for one small, clear plastic bag. "Dante," I said, my voice small. He looked up. The warmth from the past few days, the awe, the respect. It was gone. His face was carved from ice. His eyes were the eyes that had interrogated me, the eyes of the mafia boss, the killer. "What is this?" I asked, walking closer. Inside the bag was a cheap, prepaid burner phone. "I didn't know you were so well-connected," he said, his voice a low, cold whisper that was more terrifying than his roar. "What are you talking about? What is that?" "My men found it where," he said, "in the service duct in your bathroom, tucked away. Very clever." I've never seen that before in my life." "Oh, I'm sure," he sneered, but the sneer didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were just dead. We turned it on. Guess who was on the call log? Lorenzo Galliani. The rival family, the one he'd said was backing the traitor. "Dante, no, that's not mine." He stepped out from behind the desk, holding the bag. There were also text messages about the old woman, about the package being delivered, about a payment. He held it up. A payment of $50,000 transferred to an offshore account, an account that was opened 2 weeks ago in the name of Lina Moreno. I couldn't breathe. It was a frame. It was so obvious, so perfect. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "No, Dante, look at me. This is him. This is Rico. He's doing this. He knows you trust me now. He's trying to break us." "Or," Dante said, his voice dangerously soft as he stalked toward me, "Rico was your partner, or maybe you were just a tool he used. A girl from the Narrows, desperate for money, willing to get close to the boss, willing to poison his mother, willing to... "Stop it," I cried, slapping my hands over my ears. "Stop it, you don't mean this." He grabbed my wrists, his grip like steel, pulling my hands away from my face. He forced me to look at him. "Did you?" he snarled, his face inches from mine. "Were you playing me? Was all of it? The birthday, the night, was it all just part of the act?" His voice was cold, accusatory, but his eyes were shattered. They weren't cold with certainty. They were cold with the agonizing, desperate fear that I would say yes. He was a man being ripped in two. His paranoia, the instinct that had kept him alive for a decade, was screaming traitor. But his heart, the one I had just started to see, was screaming no. And that conflict, that tiny sliver of doubt, was what made it hurt so much. How can you ask me that?" My voice broke. The tears were hot, angry, full of a betrayal so deep it felt like a physical wound. "After everything, after I ran into that alley for you? After I gave you Rico?" "Or sent me to Rico?" he shot back. "A perfect misdirect. Make me look at my best friend, while the real viper was in my bed." I recoiled as if he'd struck me. I ripped my hands from his grasp. "You're a monster," I whispered, my voice trembling with a devastation so profound it was suffocating. "You're right. I was wrong about you. You don't see people. You only see pawns. You bastard." I turned. I couldn't look at him. I couldn't be in the same room. "Lina!" he yelled, his voice cracking with an authority I no longer cared about. "Go to hell," I choked out, and I ran. I ran from the office, past a stunned Marco, who just watched me go. I slammed the button for the elevator. I wasn't thinking. I wasn't running away. I was just running. I needed to see Ricky. I needed to see the one pure, good thing in my life, the one person who didn't see me as a tool or a traitor. I ran down the hallway to his suite. I didn't even knock, just burst in. "Ricky!" The room was empty. The bed was made. The art supplies were gone. "Ricky?" A small, folded note was on the pillow. "Lina, doctor, Aris is taking me for a special test at the hospital. He said it's a surprise. I'll be back soon. Love, R." A test? At a hospital? Dante had never mentioned a test. A cold, different kind of fear, sharp and clinical, pierced through the fog of my anger. "Marco!" I screamed, running back into the hallway. "Where's my brother? Where's Doctor? Aris?" Marco was already speaking into his radio, his face pale. "Boss, the boy is not in his room. Doctor, Aris is not answering his phone." I heard Dante's voice, a furious, clipped bark over the radio. And then the hallway lights went out. The entire floor was plunged into darkness, lit only by the emergency lights over the exit signs. "What's happening?" I whispered. "Security breach," Marco said, his gun drawn in an instant. "Stay behind me." "He's not with Ricky," a voice said from the darkness. I spun around. 2 men, dressed in black tactical gear, their faces hidden by masks, stepped out of the service stairwell. They weren't Dante's. Marco pushed me behind him, raising his weapon. "Who the hell?" "Rico sends his regards," the first man said, and he raised a silenced pistol. It was so fast. Foot! Marco grunted, his body jerking. He didn't fall. He turned, using his own body as a shield, and shoved me hard. "Run! Lena, run!" He went down, his gun clattering on the marble floor. I screamed. I turned and ran, back toward the elevator. The doors were open. A third man was waiting inside. He grabbed me, his hand clamping over my mouth, a thick, leathery glove that tasted of chemicals. I fought, I kicked, I bit, I clawed, but he was too strong. He dragged me into the elevator, my heels scraping on the floor. The last thing I saw before the doors slid shut was Marco, lying still in the hallway. Rico Alvanetti sat in his car, parked a block away, watching the black van pull away from the building's service exit. He smiled. He looked at the phone in his hand. Dante, my friend, Rico said, his voice full of fake panic. I got a call from an unknown number. They said they have Lena. They said, oh God, Dante? They said if you don't turn yourself over, they're going to kill her. They said something about the Galliani family. It was a perfect stage. The Galliani family gets the blame for a kidnapping. A rescue goes wrong, and Lena is found dead. A tragic casualty. By the time Dante figured out the truth, Rico would be gone. His hatred for Dante was a poison he'd been nursing for 20 years. He'd been the smarter one, the more patient one. But Dante's father, the old boss, had only ever seen Dante. Dante got the power. Dante got the respect. Rico got the leftovers. He got to be the trusted friend, the closest ally, which was just a nice word for servant. When the Galliani family approached him, offering him a partnership, offering him Dante's seat, it was the moment he'd been waiting for. The plan was simple. Poison the mother to break the son's focus, then use the chaos to take him down. But the girl had complicated everything. She had saved Maria, and worse, she had saved Dante, pulling him from the brink of his paranoia. She had to go. I woke to the smell of dust and rust. My head was pounding. My wrists and ankles were bound, the zip ties cutting deep into my skin. I was on a cold concrete floor. I blinked, my eyes adjusting to the dim light. I was in a warehouse, rows and rows of dark, silent shelves, all empty. The only light came from a single, grimy window, high up, where the moon was a pale sliver. Rico. It had to be. He had taken Ricky. Oh God. Marco. He had shot Marco. Panic, thick and suffocating, rose in my throat. "Ricky!" I screamed, my voice echoing in the vast empty space. "Ricky!" No answer, just the sound of my own voice, hollow and small. He wasn't here. This wasn't a kidnapping. It was an execution. Rico wasn't going to ransom me. He was going to kill me and stage a suicide. The devastated girlfriend, framed as a traitor, takes her own life. It was a perfect, clean ending to his story. I was not going to die here. I was not going to let him win. I dragged my body, scraping my arms on the concrete, toward the wall. My hands were tied behind my back. My feet were tied at the ankles. I was helpless. I rolled onto my side, pushing with my legs until my back was against a pile of discarded wooden pallets. I could smell motor oil and mold. I saw it, a glint of something, in the pile of trash near me, a broken bottle. No, a vase, a cheap ceramic vase, shattered into pieces. I kicked my legs, wiggling, my shoulders burning, until I was next to it. I twisted, my back screaming in protest, and my bound hands fumbled for a shard. My fingers closed around a large, curved piece. The edge was jagged, sharp. I began to saw. The plastic of the zip tie was thick. I had to angle my wrists, my hands contorting behind my back. The shard was ceramic, not glass, and it was sharp. It sliced into the skin of my wrist as I worked. I didn't care. Blood, warm and wet, trickled down my hand. I hissed, the pain so sharp it made my vision swim. But I didn't stop. I pulled the tie tighter against the blade, sawing, sawing, sawing. I could hear the plastic giving way, one strand, then another. It snapped. My hands were free. They were shaking, covered in blood. My left wrist a mess of deep, jagged cuts, but they were free. I fumbled for the shard, my numb fingers almost dropping it. I sat up, pulling my knees to my chest, and started on my ankles. This was easier. The zip tie snapped in less than a minute. I stood up, my legs trembling, and leaned against the pallet. I was bleeding. A lot. But I was free. I heard a noise, a heavy metal door sliding open at the far end of the warehouse. Dante hit the warehouse with the force of a hurricane. He hadn't believed Rico's call for a second. The moment he'd seen Ricky's empty room, the fake note, he knew. Doctor. Eris wasn't a traitor. He was a hostage, a tool. Rico had them both. No, he'd split them up. He'd taken Ricky to hold him, and Lena. He'd taken her to kill. He'd found Marco in the hallway, bleeding, but alive. The vest had caught the rounds. Rico's men. Marco had gurgled before passing out. That was all Dante needed. He didn't send his men. He led them. A small, elite team of 4, the only ones he knew, without a shadow of a doubt, were not on Rico's payroll. They didn't knock. They used a breaching charge on a side door, the explosion a deafening crack that shook the entire building. Dante was the first one in. He moved like a shadow, his weapon up, his eyes scanning the darkness. The rescue wasn't chaotic. It was brutal. It was a precise, violent, and terrifyingly efficient operation. They met the first 2 men on the stairwell. Dante didn't hesitate. 2 shots, 2 bodies dropping. He was not the cold boss. He was not the conflicted lover. He was pure, unadulterated vengeance. I heard the explosion. It sounded like the world was ending. Then, gunshots. Not silenced. Loud. Cannon fire reports that echoed through the warehouse. "Lena!" "Dante?" It was his voice. He was here. "In here!" I screamed, my voice raw. "Dante!" I scrambled out from behind the pallets and saw them. 2 men, at the far end, turning, their guns raising. "Lena, get down!" he roared. I dove back behind the pallets, my heart exploding in my chest, the air filled with gunfire. A deafening, terrifying war. It was over in seconds. Silence. The only sound was the drip, drip, drip of something, and my own ragged breathing. "Lena." His voice was different now. Not the commander, not the killer, just Dante. His voice was raw. I peeked out. He was standing in the middle of the warehouse, his gun at his side, his chest heaving. He was alone. His men were securing the perimeter. "I'm here," I whispered. I stood up, my legs shaking. He saw me. His eyes swept over me, taking in the blood, the dirt, the terror. His gun clattered to the floor. He crossed the distance in 3 long strides. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't ask what happened. He just lifted me. His arms went around me, one under my knees, one behind my back, and he pulled me against his chest as if he was starving and I was air. He buried his face in my hair, his body trembling with a rage and a relief so profound it shook us both. "You're bleeding," he whispered, his voice thick, as he saw my hands. I cut myself. On the vas, I got free, I stammered, my body finally giving in, shaking uncontrollably. He held me tighter. I know, he said, his voice breaking. I know you did. He carried me out of that dark, bloody place. He didn't let anyone else touch me. He put me in the back of his own SUV and held my bleeding hands in his, wrapping them in a handkerchief, his touch so gentle it made me cry. "Marco?" I whispered, as the car sped through the night. "Alive," he said, his jaw tight. "The vest caught it. He's alive." He didn't take me to the penthouse. He took me to the hospital. A private, clean, quiet wing I had never seen. He never left my side. I woke up to the steady beep of a heart monitor. The first thing I saw was the white of the ceiling. The second thing I saw was him. He was asleep in the chair next to my bed, his head slumped forward, his hand still clutching mine. Even in sleep, he was still in his black tactical gear, stained with dirt and my blood. He looked broken, exhausted, young. My left wrist was stitched and bandaged. My body ached, but I was alive. I squeezed his hand. His head snapped up, his eyes, dark and haunted, instantly focused on me. The relief that washed over his face was so powerful it took my breath away. "Hey," I whispered, my voice a dry rasp. "Hey," he said, his voice rough. He stood, leaning over me, his hand coming up to touch my face, his thumb brushing my cheek. "How do you feel?" "Like I got hit by a truck," I admitted. "You almost did." He was quiet for a long time, his eyes searching mine. The coldness was gone. The paranoia was gone. All the walls were shattered, reduced to rubble, just like the warehouse. "Rico?" I asked. "Gone. Got away. For now. But he doesn't have Ricky. My men picked up Eris and your brother. They're at a new safe house. They're fine. Ricky is safe." "Good," I whispered, a tear slipping from the corner of my eye. "Lena," he said, his voice raw, "in the office, what I said, You were a bastard," I said, a small, sad smile touching my lips. "I was," he agreed, no hesitation. "I was torn. I saw that phone, and my world, the rules I've lived by. It all pointed to you, but my heart, I didn't want to believe it, and I chose to be cruel. I'm sorry." "I know." We were quiet. The beep of the monitor was the only sound. "I'm so tired," I whispered. "The exhaustion of my entire life, of the running, the fear, the debt, the poisoning, the kidnapping. It all came crashing down on me. Dante, I'm so tired of running." He sat on the edge of the bed, his weight a solid, comforting presence. He took my unbandaged hand, lifting it to his lips, kissing my knuckles. His eyes, when they met mine, were stripped of everything but a raw, aching sincerity. "Then don't," he whispered. "Stop running. Stay." It wasn't a question. It wasn't an order. "Stay with me, Lena. Stay." The word hung in the air of that sterile hospital room, a word that was so much more than a request. It was a plea. It was a promise. It was a command. And for the first time in my life, a command from him didn't feel like a cage. It felt like an anchor. I spent 2 more days in that private hospital wing. Dante, a constant, silent shadow. He didn't leave. He worked from the stiff-backed visitor's chair, his phone calls low and vicious, his focus absolute as he began the hunt for Rico. He slept, when he slept at all, in that same chair, his head bowed, but he never let go of my hand. On the 3rd morning, a doctor with kind, tired eyes unwrapped my wrist to check the stitches. They were clean. Angry red lines against my pale skin, a permanent reminder of how I'd earned my freedom. Dante was standing by the window, his back to me, on the phone. His entire body was rigid. I was used to his tension, but this was different. This was still. "When?" he said, his voice flat. He listened. "I'll be there." He hung up and turned to me. His face was unreadable, but his eyes, there was a light in them I'd never seen. Not rage, not passion, it was hope. "My mother," he said, his voice thick. "She's awake and she's talking." "We didn't go to the hospital she was in. Not yet." Dante disappeared for 2 hours, and when he returned, his face was carved from granite. She's lucid," he said, sitting on the edge of my bed. He took my good hand, his thumb tracing my knuckles. "She's weak, but her... Dante, that's amazing," I whispered. "She named him," he said, his voice dropping to a low growl. She saw his face. Right before she collapsed, it wasn't just Stefan. He was supervised. "Rico," I breathed. "No, he's too smart for that. He sent his own man, a member of my elite security, Corrado, the man who guards my mother. He was Rico's." The betrayal was layered, a sickness that went to the bone. Corrado, he confessed," Dante continued, his eyes dark with a black, cold fury. "He was paid off by Rico. He helped Stefan switch the bottles. He was there to make sure she drank it. And then he let Stefan leave, knowing Rico's other men were waiting for him in the alley. He admitted everything. Rico has been planning this for years, aligning with the Gallianis, building his own crew inside mine." "So you have him," I said. "You have the proof." He stood, pacing the small room, a caged lion. "I have nothing. Rico's gone. The moment he lost contact with the team at the warehouse, the moment his plan to frame you failed. He vanished. He liquidated his accounts. His houses are empty. His known associates are either dead or have disappeared. He's underground. And Corrado, he can't testify. He had an accident in his holding cell." My stomach twisted. "An accident, yo." "He knew he was a dead man," Dante said, his voice void of emotion. "He chose his own way out. Suicide. Rico is clean. No witnesses, no trail. Just my word against a ghost." He was going to hunt him. I could see it in the set of his jaw, the deadly focus in his eyes. "So what now?" I asked. "Now," he said, his voice final. "I go underground, too. The police can't find him. The press will only get in the way. This is my world, my rules. I'm going to find him, and I'm going to rip his world apart at the seams." He came back to the bed and kissed my forehead. It was a kiss of finality. A goodbye. "You and Ricky, I'm moving you to a new safe house. It's in the mountains. He'll have his doctor. You will be safe. No one will find you. I'll come for you when it's done." He was leaving me behind. He was going to put me back in the protected box while he went to war. The old me, the terrified waitress, would have been grateful. I was not that girl anymore. "No," I said, my voice clear and strong. He stopped, his hand on the door. "Lena, it's not a request." "I know." I stood up from the bed, the thin hospital gown doing nothing to hide the new, cold steel in my spine. "And I'm still saying no. You are not putting me in a box in the mountains. You are not coming for me when it's done. You're going after a ghost. You're emotional. You're furious, and you're walking in blind." "I know what I'm doing," he snarled, the mask of the boss slipping. "Do you?" I challenged, walking right up to him. "You're a king, Dante. You sit in your penthouse and move your pieces. Rico was your piece. He knows how you move. He knows how you think. You're going to go to your usual haunts, your usual sources. He'll be waiting. He's expecting the lion." "What's your point?" he asked, his eyes narrowing. "My point," I said, "is that he's not expecting the mouse. He's not expecting the waitress. He's not expecting me." He laughed, a short, sharp, humorless sound. "Lena, this isn't a game. This is my life." "And it's mine, too," I shouted, my good hand fisting in the fabric of his shirt. "Did you forget that? He tried to kill me. He framed me. He took my brother. He shot your man right in front of me. I am in this, Dante. And I am not going to sit in a safe house and wait for you to either come back victorious or not come back at all. I am done being a pawn. I am done being protected." "You want to find him? You need me." "How?" he asked, his anger gone, replaced by a baffled, intense curiosity. "How do you, a waitress? Find a man my entire organization has lost. Because you're looking at the top, and I said, my words coming fast, you're looking at his money, his houses, his power. Rico is smart. He's gone back to the bottom. He needs new men, new supplies. He'll be using the same networks I grew up in, the service entrances, the temporary staff, the kitchen whispers. I know those people. Dante. I know the banquet schedules for every hotel in this city. I know the suppliers. I know who talks. I can set a trap you can't even see. I can hear the whispers you're deaf to. He's expecting the boss. He'll never ever see me coming. He was silent. He just stared at me. The awe I'd seen in his eyes after I'd found the logbook was back, tenfold. He was looking at me like he'd never truly seen me before. You're right, he said, his voice quiet. You're not a pawn. You're a queen. He didn't take me to a safe house. He took me with him. We left that night. We didn't take his armored SUV or his private plane. We took a nondescript black sedan, a car with a souped-up engine, but a scratched-up body. He drove. Just us. We left Port Veritas in our rearview mirror, the city of diamonds and blood fading into the night. We drove for hours, heading north into the mountains, but not to the safe house he'd prepared. We were following a lead, a whisper I'd gotten from Maya, my old co-worker, who I'd called from a burner phone, a banquet manager at a countryside estate, a man I knew to be quietly corrupt, had suddenly put in a massive, last-minute catering order, paid for in cash, for a private party. An estate that, according to Dante's database, was owned by a shell corporation tied to the Galliani family. This was our trap. The silence in the car was thick at first, broken only by the sound of the road. But as the city lights gave way to the blackness of the countryside, the walls between us dissolved. You're driving too fast, I said quietly, as he took a curve at 90. He eased off the gas. Sorry. You're not used to driving yourself, are you? He glanced at me, a small ghost of a smile touching his lips. I'm not used to a lot of this. My father, he never drove. He said it was for the help. He said a boss sits in the back. My father loved to drive, I said, the memory soft and sad. He had an old, beat-up truck. He'd take me and Ricky out on Sundays. He'd say, "A man's free when he's behind the wheel. No one can tell him where to go." Dante was quiet for a long time. Your father was a fool, he said. But this time, the words held no venom. They were just sad. He was free, so he drove right into a cage. He was just a man, I whispered, the same words I'd used before. No, Dante said, his voice rough. He was a father, like mine. He gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. This winery where Rico is hiding. It was my father's. His first. He loved it. He loved the land. He wanted to be a farmer, I think, a winemaker, but the family, the business, it wouldn't let him. It poisoned him, too. It made him the man he was. He looked at me, the dashboard lights casting shadows across his face. I hate that place. It's everything I've spent my life running from, the ghost of what I am. And what am I asked, my voice barely audible. He took his hand off the wheel and, in a move that was so natural, so easy, he found my hand in the darkness. He laced his fingers with mine. You, he said, his voice thick, are the one good thing that came out of all this. You're the one who, you're not running, you're running toward it, with me. We drove on, and we talked. I told him about Ricky, about the nights I'd sit by his bed, listening to him breathe, praying the rattle wouldn't get worse. I told him about the crushing weight of the debt, the fear of the collectors, the small, stupid hopes I had for a bakery. He told me about his childhood, a lonely, silent boy in a house full of guards, a mother who was a ghost long before she was poisoned, a father who taught him that love was a weakness, that trust was a liability. He told me about the day he took over, at 22, and the cold, awful silence in his heart. We were two broken, lonely people who had found each other in the wreckage of a war. We stopped hours later in a small town that was barely a dot on the map. A single blinking yellow light, a gas station, and a small countryside inn. Its vacancy sign a lonely beacon in the dark. "We need to sleep," he said. "The trap is set for tomorrow. Rico thinks he's meeting a Galliani representative to finalize the transfer of power." He got one room. The inn was old but clean, a smell of lemon polish and old wood. The room had a single, queen-sized bed with a handmade quilt and a small, electric fireplace. It was the most normal, most domestic place I'd ever been with him. And that, somehow, made the tension unbearable. He locked the door, jamming a chair under the knob, just like I had done in my apartment, a lifetime ago. He checked the windows, he cleared the room, the boss. Then he turned to me. The boss was gone. It was just Dante. He looked hesitant. This was new territory. We weren't in his penthouse, his kingdom. We were equals. "Lena," he started, "you can have the bed. "Dante," I said, cutting him off. I walked over to him, my bandaged wrist a stark white in the dim light. "Stop." I reached up, my good hand touching his face, his jaw rough with stubble. "We're not boss and witness. We're not captor and prisoner. Not anymore." He closed his eyes, leaning into my touch as if he were starving. "I don't know how to be anything else," he whispered. "Then let me show you," I said. I kissed him. It wasn't the desperate, angry kiss from the storm. It wasn't the slow, grateful kiss from my birthday. This was new. This was a choice, made by two people who saw each other, all walls down, all masks off. It was a slow-burning fire. It started with trust. His hands, so capable of violence, were incredibly gentle as they framed my face. My hands, which had trembled in fear, were steady as they unbuttoned his shirt. There was no rush. There was no agenda. It was just discovery. We made love in the quiet of that small, anonymous room, to the backdrop of the buzzing fireplace. It was a physical conversation, a continuation of the one in the car. It was about shared fears and shared losses and a deep, profound, and terrifying connection. His touches were slow, deliberate, worshipful. He kissed the scars on my wrist, his lips soft, and I felt a healing begin that had nothing to do with stitches. And I held him. I anchored him, showing him with my body what I had been too afraid to say with my words. I am here. I am not leaving. This time, when we lay tangled in the sheets, he didn't watch me from a distance. He held me, his arms wrapped around me, my back pressed against his chest, his breath warm on my neck. "Stay with me," he had said in the hospital. "I'm here." I whispered into the darkness, and I felt his arms tighten. His answer a silent promise. The next day, the sun was bright, the air crisp. The peace of the night was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp tension. Today, we ended it. The winery was abandoned, just as he'd said. It sat on a hill, overlooking a valley, the vines overgrown and wild. The main building was stone, old and beautiful, but the windows were boarded up. It was a place of ghosts. "My father's dream," Dante said, his voice flat, as we got out of the car. He was all boss again, black suit, earpiece. A gun I knew was tucked at the small of his back. "Dante, are you ready for this?" I asked. He looked at me, and his face softened. "I am, but you don't have to be here. You set the trap. It's done. You can wait in the car." "You really haven't learned anything, have you?" I said, a small smile playing on my lips. "I'm not waiting in the car. Dante, I'm seeing this through." His own team, the 4 loyal men, were already inside, hidden. The trap was simple. Rico was coming at noon, expecting to meet a Galliani lieutenant. Instead, he would find Dante. We waited inside, in the vast, dusty main hall, where huge, empty wine barrels stood like silent sentinels. At 5 minutes past noon, a car rolled up. Rico. He got out, flanked by 2 men. He He was smiling, his old, confident, easy smile. He walked into that winery like he already owned it. "Dante, my friend," he called out, his voice echoing in the stone room. "A bit dramatic, don't you think? An abandoned winery? This isn't one of your father's old movies." Dante stepped out from the shadows of the barrels. "It's fitting," Dante said, his voice a cold, even calm. "This was my father's. A place he loved, a place you defiled, just by being here." Rico's smile faltered. "Just a fraction. Dante, I heard about Lena, a tragedy. The Gallianis, they went too far. I'm here to help you, to make a deal. We can end this." "A deal?" Dante said. "Like the deal you made with Corrado? Like the deal you made with Stefan? Like the deal you made for my mother's life?" Rico's hand went to his jacket. His men tensed, their hands going to their guns. I don't know what you're talking about," Rico stammered, his arrogance evaporating, replaced by the slick fear of a cornered rat. "He's stalling, boss," one of Rico's men whispered. "I'm not," Dante said. He stepped further into the light. "I know you're wondering. I know you've been checking. So let me save you the trouble." Dante paused, letting the silence stretch. "She's alive. Rico, my mother is awake, and she named you." It was a lie. She had named Corrado, but it was a lie that had the beautiful, perfect weight of truth. Rico's face went white. The panic was absolute. He knew he was a dead man. You're bluffing." "Am I?" Dante said. And that's when Rico pulled his gun. "Kill him!" he screamed at his men. It was chaos. Rico's men raised their weapons. I saw Dante's hand blur toward the small of his back, but one of Rico's men was closer to me, his gun swinging not toward Dante, but toward me, the loose end. I didn't think. I grabbed a heavy green wine bottle from a dusty rack next to me. He was turning, the black circle of the muzzle. I screamed a raw, primal sound, and I swung the bottle with all my strength, smashing it against the side of his head. He staggered, stunned, his gun firing harmlessly into the stone floor. That was all Dante needed, the man's momentary distraction. Dante didn't shoot the man I'd hit. He shot Rico. The sound was deafening in the stone room. A single, controlled shot. Rico screamed, a high, thin sound, and grabbed his shoulder, his gun clattering to the floor as he collapsed. Dante's team was on the other man in an instant, disarming him, forcing him to his knees. It was over. Dante walked, not ran, toward Rico, who was on the ground, clutching his bleeding shoulder, his face a mask of pain and hate. Dante kicked the gun away from Rico's hand. He raised his own, leveling it not at Rico's chest, but at his head. His face was a mask of cold, pure, righteous fury, the son, avenging his mother, the boss, ending a traitor. This was the execution. This was the end. "Dante, no!" I yelled, my voice echoing. He didn't flinch. I ran to him, grabbing his arm, his gun arm. "Don't," I whispered, my voice shaking. "Dante, look at me. Look at me." He turned his head, his eyes black, cold and dead, the killer. "He's beaten," I said, my voice desperate. "It's over. If you end him, if you kill him like this, in cold blood, you become everything you hated. You become your father. You become the man who poisons his own life. This isn't you. This isn't the man This isn't you." He stared at me, his arm rigid, the gun still pointed at Rico's head. I could see the war behind his eyes, the lifetime of training, of business, of blood, fighting against the man he was trying to be. He let out a breath, a long, shuddering sigh. The tension in his arm went slack. He lowered the gun. He looked down at Rico, his face full of a cold, tired disgust, but not murder. "You're not worth the bullet," he spat. He turned and walked away from him. He pulled out his phone. He didn't call his men. He didn't call the police. He made a call to someone in between. "It's done," and he said. "The package is gift wrapped. The winery. Bring the transport." Within 10 minutes, a black, unmarked van arrived. Not police, not mafia, men in dark suits who moved with a quiet, federal efficiency. They cuffed Rico and his men, read them no rights, and loaded them into the van. What was that? I asked. A deal, Dante said, tucking his gun away. He looked tired, but lighter. A deal I made a long time ago. A certain contact in law enforcement. He's been wanting Rico for years. He knew he was tied to the Gallianis, to a network of corruption that went all the way to the top, but he could never get him. So you gave him Rico. I gave him Rico, his men, and the entire Galliani operation on a silver platter. Dante said, he looked at me, a small, wry smile, in exchange for considerations. What considerations? Full immunity. For my mother. For any involvement, real or perceived. And for me. Wiping clean certain outstanding charges from my father's day. It's a fresh start. He had done it. He hadn't just won. He had changed the entire game. He had used his enemy's betrayal to clean his own slate. He walked over to me, in the dust and the silence of his father's winery. He reached out and gently touched the side of my face. "It's over," he whispered. "It's over," I repeated, my voice shaking with relief. The ghost was caught, the war was done, and we were, somehow, still standing. The war was over, but the rebuilding had just begun. In the week that followed the confrontation at the winery, Dante Silviero did not rest. He returned to Port Veritas, but not to the penthouse. He moved into a secure, undisclosed location, a bunker of an office in the heart of the financial district. And from there, he systematically, and with the precision of a surgeon, cleaned house. The news of Rico's betrayal had ripped through the organization like a shockwave. It was not a violent, chaotic purge like his father would have ordered. It was a quiet, cold, and final restructuring. Men who were loyal to Rico, men who had been taking bribes from the Gallianis, men who had simply looked the other way. They didn't end up in the harbor. They simply disappeared from the payroll. Dante called them into his office, one by one. He showed them the evidence of their disloyalty, which his new, much smaller, much more loyal team had gathered, and he gave them a choice: exile or prison. He handed over the lesser offenders to his contact in law enforcement, a clean sweep that made the police department look like heroes and solidified Dante's new, untouchable position. The more dangerous ones were given a one-way ticket to another continent, their assets frozen, their power in Port Veritas erased as if it had never existed. Dante was restructuring his empire. He was cutting out the rot, the blood, the parts of his father's legacy that had almost cost him his mother. He was turning a criminal enterprise into a legitimate corporation, one that operated in the shadows. Yes, but with a new code, his code. And while he was rebuilding his world, I went back to the ruins of mine. Dante had wanted me to stay with Ricky at the safe house, but I refused. I'm not a witness, I told him, and I'm not a prisoner, not anymore. So he'd had me escorted back to the Narrows, back to my old apartment building. The landlord, Mr. Salvi, was gone. His death still an unsolved mystery that the police seemed to have no interest in. A new management company had taken over, and my rent was, mysteriously, paid in full for the next year. I walked into that 2-room apartment, and it was like stepping into a stranger's life. It was so small. The peeling paint, the rattling radiator, the smell of damp and old cooking. It had been my entire world. Now, it felt like a cage I had already escaped. I had spent weeks in a glass tower, a prisoner of obscene luxury. I had spent a night in a countryside inn, a partner in a dangerous plan. I had faced down a killer in a winery. The girl who used to cry over a $20 tip was gone. I sat on my lumpy mattress, the one I used to share with Ricky. The silence was deafening. There was no hum of high-end security, no clicking of a guard's radio, no low, gravelly voice on the phone in the next room. There was no Dante. I found myself empty. I was adrift. I was safe. For the first time in my life, I was free. And I had never been more miserable. I had left the girl from the Narrows behind, but I didn't yet know how to be the woman who had walked out of the winery. 5 days. 5 days of silence. I visited Ricky every day. He was in a small, private rehabilitation home, a place that looked more like a countryside resort, paid for by Dante's new health insurance plan. He was thriving. He was healthy. He was happy. But Dante, he was a ghost. I saw his name in the financial papers, a brief mention of Silviero Holdings acquiring a new shipping company. The war was over and the king was back on his throne, and I, apparently, was back in the village. I was standing at my small kitchen window, staring at the brick wall of the building opposite, holding a cold cup of coffee, when the knock came. It was a quiet knock, not a fist, not a command, just a knock. My heart stopped. I opened the door. He was standing there, not in a suit, not in tactical gear. He was in a simple dark gray sweater and jeans. His hair was a little longer, his face a little thinner. He looked tired. He looked human. And he was alone. No Marco, no guards, no black SUV at the curb. He had walked on foot into the Narrows. For him, it was the equivalent of walking into a lion's den without a weapon. "Hi," I said, my voice a stupid, breathless squeak. "Hi, Lena," he said, his voice quiet, that low rumble that still made my stomach clench. But this time, it was soft. Can I come in?" I just nodded. Stepping back, he walked into my tiny apartment, and he didn't shrink it. He seemed to fit. He looked at the small room, at the worn-out sofa, at the single painting Ricky had done, which I'd taped to the wall. This is where you lived," he said, his voice full of a quiet awe. "It's not much," I murmured, feeling suddenly ashamed. You survived here," he said, turning to me, his dark eyes full of an emotion I couldn't place. "You raised your brother here. You fought for him. You're incredible. Dante, what are you doing here? You shouldn't be here. It's not safe. For you." He smiled, a real, small, tired smile. "I'm not the king of Port Veritas. Lena, not anymore. I'm just a man running a business, and I've been cleaning house. It's been a lot." "I know," I said. I'm glad it's done." We stood there, in the middle of my tiny apartment, a few feet of worn linoleum between us, and it felt like a canyon. This was the moment where he said thank you and goodbye. "I went to see Ricky this morning," he said. My breath hitched. "Oh?" He's a great kid, really smart. He was telling me about a history project, something about the Roman aqueducts. He drew me a picture of one." He reached into the pocket of his jeans and pulled out a folded piece of paper, a child's drawing in crayon of a large, complicated stone structure. He said something," Dante continued, his voice thick. He wouldn't look at me. He was staring at the drawing. I told him his new school was all set up, a good private school, near the clinic. He starts on Monday, and he hugged me. Dante's voice broke, just for a second, and he cleared his throat. "He hugged me, Lena, and he told me, he said I was his hero for fixing his lungs." I couldn't stop the tears. They just spilled, all the months of terror, of fear, of fighting. It all came out in that one perfect, beautiful moment, and my brother, healthy, and the man who had done it, standing in my kitchen. "Dante," I whispered, and I cried. He closed the distance. He put his hands on my shoulders, his touch warm, solid. Hey, it's okay. He's okay. You're okay." "Thank you," I choked out, my hands coming up to rest on his chest. "Thank you for saving him. I never... Thank you. I need to ask you something," he said, his voice low, his hands sliding from my shoulders down my arms to take my hands, my scarred hand and my good hand. He held them both. "I'm done, Lena, the blood, the business. My father's way, I'm done, I've cleaned it out. It's a holding company now. It's shipping, it's real estate, it's legitimate as I can make it." He looked me in the eyes, and his were stripped bare. No boss, no king, just a man. "I don't want the penthouse," and he said. "I don't want the guards. I don't want the cage. I want what we had in that inn. I want something real." He took a deep breath. "I'm asking you to move in with me, not to the penthouse. I bought a house outside the city, on the water. It has a yard. It's just a house." He was rambling. Dante Silviero was rambling, and it was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard. "I'm not asking you for protection," he said, his voice gaining strength. "I'm not offering you a contract. I'm not asking you to be my witness or my prisoner. I'm asking you to start a life with me, just us." I looked at him, at this man who had held my life in his hands, who had been my terror and my savior. He was offering me everything. "Yes," I whispered. His shoulders sagged in relief. "Yes," I said, my voice stronger, "but on one condition." His old suspicious self flickered in his eyes. "What?" Equal ground," and I said, I'm not your kept woman, Dante. I'm not a guest. I'm not someone you're protecting. If we do this, we are partners in everything." He stared at me, and then he laughed, a real, deep, actual laugh. It was the first time I'd ever heard it. It was a wonderful sound. He pulled me against him, his arms wrapping around me, lifting me off the floor. "Equal ground," he said, his face buried in my hair. "Lena Moreno, you are the most terrifying, brilliant, impossible woman I have ever met. Partners. Yes, God, yes." We went to see his mother the next day. She was in a private, sun-drenched room in a long-term care facility that looked like a 5-star hotel. She was in a wheelchair, frail, but her eyes were bright. The fire was back. She still couldn't speak, not more than a whisper, but she was Maria. Dante knelt by her chair, his large hand holding her small, thin one. "Hi, Mama," he whispered, his voice thick. She just smiled, a slow, weak smile, and with her other hand, she patted his head, his Dante Silviero, kneeling like a little boy, getting his hair patted by his mother. "Mama," he said, there's someone I want you to meet, someone who saved us." He stood, and he held his hand out for me. I walked forward, my nerves screaming. This was the matriarch. I stood in front of her. "Hello, Mrs. Silviero, I'm Lena. It's so good to see you looking so well." Maria Silviero looked at me, her eyes. They were Dante's eyes, dark, intelligent, and they saw everything. She looked at my face, at my scarred wrist, and then at the way her son was looking at me. She smiled, a slow, knowing and approving smile. She let go of Dante's hand, and she reached for mine. She took my hand, the one with the scars, and she just held it. She squeezed it gently, a blessing, a welcome, a passing of the torch. Dante let out a breath he'd been holding, and I saw a peace settle on his face that I knew had been missing his entire life. 1 year later, the air was crisp, the smell of fresh bread and cinnamon so thick it was almost decadent. I stood in front of the glass doors, my hand on the handle. A sign, painted in a simple, elegant script, hung above the door. Lena's. It was mine, the small bakery I had always dreamed of. It was in a good neighborhood, just on the edge of the financial district. I had investors, anonymous, of course. An investment group that had approached me, offering me a zero-interest loan to start my business. The paperwork had been signed by a D.S. Holdings. I turned the key, and I opened my bakery for the first time. 5 blocks away, a tall man in a dark wool coat was walking down the street, his hand held by a small, energetic boy. And then, Ricky said, his voice loud, the aqueduct broke and the whole town flooded. Well, not really, but Mr. Henderson said it was a structural failure. A structural failure, Dante said, his voice serious, but a smile was playing on his lips. Well, we can't have that. Did you finish your homework on it? Duh, Ricky said, adjusting the backpack that was, frankly, too big for him. Lena helped me. Dante laughed. Of course she did. He stopped at the gates of the most exclusive private school in Port Veritas. He knelt, just as I'd seen him do with his mother. He fixed Ricky's collar. All right, have a good day. Listen to your teachers, and be good. I know. Ricky rolled his eyes, a perfect teenage gesture. Then, he did something that made the 1 or 2 other parents on the sidewalk stop and stare. He threw his arms around the neck of Dante Silviero. Thanks, Dante. See you tonight? You know it, kid, Dante said, his voice rough, as he hugged him back. Now go, you'll be late. He watched Ricky run up the steps, then he turned, his hands in his pockets, and he walked, just a man toward his office. That night, I was on the roof, not a penthouse roof, my roof, the small, flat roof above my bakery. I'd put a few chairs up here, some planter boxes. It was my sanctuary. I heard the door open, and I didn't have to turn. I felt him. He walked over, his suit jacket gone, his tie loosened. He handed me a glass of wine. How was the first day? He asked, his voice a low rumble in the evening air. We sold out, I said, a smile I couldn't contain spreading across my face. Everything. By 3 o'clock, I think this might actually work. I never had any doubt, he said, leaning against the railing next to me, his shoulder brushing mine. We looked out at the city. The lights of Port Veritas glittered in the distance. His city, my city, our city. It was quiet, a comfortable, easy silence, the silence of partners. He took my hand, his thumb, as it had in the car, traced my knuckles, then he turned my hand over, the one with the jagged white scars on the wrist. He lowered his head and he pressed a kiss, soft and warm, into my palm, right on the scars. He looked up at me, his dark eyes, once so cold, now filled with a warmth that was just for me. You saved my mother's life, he whispered, his voice thick. But you gave me mine back too. I smiled, my heart so full I thought it might burst. I leaned in, and he met me halfway, his arms wrapping around me, pulling me in. He held me, and I held him, on the roof of our new life, with the whole world spread out at our feet. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed the journey of Lena and Dante. My name is Angelina, and this is Mafia Romance Stories. I'm so curious to know where you are in the world. Please, leave a comment and let me know what city or country you're listening from. It's amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you loved this story, please consider subscribing to the channel. It's the best way to make sure you never miss a new romance. And finally, what did you think? Did you love Lena's strength? Were you rooting for Dante? Share your thoughts in English in the comments below. I read them all. Thank you again, and I'll see you in the next story.